When investigators studied the evidence inside the lighthouse, they expected to find clues explaining the disappearance. Instead, they discovered details that made the mystery even more disturbing. After the disappearance of the three lighthouse keepers, investigators began carefully examining everything left behind in the lighthouse. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The kitchen looked tidy. The beds were neatly arranged. The lantern at the top of the lighthouse had been cleaned and maintained properly. But the deeper investigators looked, the stranger things became. One of the first clues came from the raincoats hanging near the door. There were 3 keepers living in the lighthouse. But only 2 raincoats were hanging on the hooks. This meant one keeper had gone outside without taking his coat. Anyone familiar with life at sea knows how dangerous that is. The winds around the Flannan Isles can be brutally cold. Experienced lighthouse keepers never went outside unprepared. Which raised an obvious question. What could have been so urgent that someone rushed outside without even grabbing a coat? The next clue came from the lighthouse logbook. The keepers had been recording daily notes about weather conditions and routine activities. But the final entries were unusual. One entry described extremely strong winds hitting the island. Another entry mentioned that one of the keepers appeared unusually quiet and distressed. Then another line described the storm as the worst the writer had ever experienced. But when investigators compared the logbook entries with official weather reports from nearby ships, something surprising appeared. The weather had actually been calm. There were no major storms recorded in the area during that time. So why were the lighthouse keepers writing about violent storms that apparently didn't exist? This contradiction confused investigators for years. Then another important clue was discovered outside the lighthouse. At the western landing platform, there was clear evidence of severe damage. Heavy iron railings were bent out of shape. Large storage boxes had been smashed open. A crane used for lifting equipment had been ripped from its base. The damage was extreme. And it was located more than 100 feet above sea level. This suggested that incredibly powerful waves had struck the island. Investigators began to believe that a massive rogue wave could explain the disappearance. But even that theory left many questions unanswered. Why were all 3 men outside at the same time? Why would they abandon the lighthouse completely, something keepers were strictly trained never to do? And why did the logbook describe storms that never appeared in official records? Even today, historians still debate these clues. The evidence seems to point toward a tragic accident. But the details never fully add up. But evidence only tells part of the story. Because the theories about what really happened on that island are even more mysterious.